My charming new manager became obsessed with me. HR ignored the signs, and things spiraled into stalking and surveillance. I took him and the company to court. I won. But the real fight was getting my life back. Hi Reddit. I never thought I'd be the one posting here, but I need to get this off my chest. I've been holding this story in for over a year, and after everything that's happened, I think I'm finally ready to talk. Let me start by saying that I, 29, work in marketing at a mid-sized tech company. I've been there for 6 years now, and I used to really love my job. It felt like a family, until he arrived. Let's call him Brian. Brian, mid-30s, maybe 36, was hired as our new marketing director after our previous manager retired. At first, we were all excited. His resume was impressive. Years at big-name companies, awards, glowing recommendations. He seemed like a fresh start, full of ideas. He was also charming. Too charming. He made an effort to learn everyone's names in the first week. He brought donuts every Friday, asked people about their weekend plans, remembered birthdays. At first, I thought it was great. Finally, someone who actually cared about the team. But he paid special attention to me. He complimented my work in every meeting, even when I hadn't done anything worth noting. He laughed a little too hard at my jokes. When he walked past my desk, he always stopped to chat, and lingered a little too long. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just trying to build rapport. I'm friendly by nature, and I didn't want to assume the worst. I've dealt with overly enthusiastic coworkers before. But then he started messaging me after work hours. It started small, a Slack message here and there, asking about a project or giving quick feedback. Then it escalated to personal texts. At first, they were work-related. Then came the "just thinking about our conversation today" messages. Or, "hope you're having a relaxing night, you deserve it." Still, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe I was reading into it too much. Then came the incident at the offsite. Our team went on a weekend retreat to a cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be a mix of workshops and relaxation, bonding time. Brian had pushed hard for it. Saturday night, there was a bonfire. We were all drinking, laughing, being casual. Brian sat next to me and offered me a drink, something he'd mixed himself. I declined politely, saying I was good with what I had. He got weirdly insistent. "Come on, just one. I made it for you." It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make a scene in front of my coworkers. So I accepted, took a sip, and then quietly dumped the rest when no one was looking. That night, he knocked on the door of my cabin. I was staying alone, not by choice, just how the rooms had worked out. He stood there with a bottle of wine, smiling. "I thought we could talk," he said. I told him I was tired and about to sleep. He lingered, then finally left, but not before saying, "You're special, you know that?" I didn't sleep that night. When we got back to the office on Monday, I reported it to HR. They nodded, took notes, thanked me for coming forward. They said they'd look into it. But nothing changed. Brian kept acting like nothing had happened. In fact, he doubled down. He started giving me impossible deadlines. He cut me off in meetings. He questioned my performance, said I was distracted and not focused. My team started noticing the tension, but no one said anything. Then he started a rumor. He told people we'd had a moment during the retreat. That I was sending mixed signals. That I wanted something more. I found out when a coworker, someone I trusted, pulled me aside and asked if it was true. I was mortified. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was character assassination. And I felt like I was losing my mind. I went back to HR. Again, they said they'd investigate. Again, nothing happened. And then came the security footage. When HR finally followed up with me, a full 3 weeks after my second complaint, they told me there was no conclusive evidence of inappropriate behavior. I asked if they had checked the security footage from the night Brian knocked on my cabin door during the retreat. They said, there was no camera outside that particular cabin. I felt a mix of rage and helplessness. It was like screaming underwater. I knew something was wrong, but no one could hear me. Or maybe no one wanted to. I started documenting everything. Every weird comment. Every text. Every change in tone during meetings. I kept a digital folder with screenshots, email timestamps, Slack threads, even photos of how he looked at me when he thought no one else was watching. But Brian was careful. He never said anything outright threatening. Nothing clearly romantic. Just enough to make me uncomfortable, just enough to make me doubt myself, and never enough that anyone else could call it proof. Then one morning, my work laptop had been tampered with. I opened it, and the login screen was in Spanish. I'm fluent, but I never use it on my work machine. Then I saw apps open that I'd never used. Screen recorders, monitoring tools. My files had been accessed. My personal Google Docs were open. I panicked. I took the laptop straight to IT. They looked into it and confirmed that there had been unauthorized access. Someone with admin privileges, they said. Guess who had admin privileges? When I brought this to HR, I expected things to finally get serious. I had evidence now. But they hesitated. He says he was just checking on team productivity, they told me. It's within his rights as a manager to monitor performance. I was stunned. He went through my personal files, and they were defending him. I realized then that HR wasn't there to protect me. They were there to protect the company. I started looking for jobs that night. But Brian must have sensed it, because that's when things got worse. He started showing up in places outside of work. The first time, it was a coincidence. I was at my usual Sunday cafe, reading. He walked in and smiled like he was surprised. Oh hey. Didn't know you came here too. I was polite but curt. I left early. Then he showed up at my gym. Then at a friend's birthday party, one he shouldn't have known about. She told me later she'd added him on LinkedIn, and he'd asked her about it, acting like he might stop by. It felt like I was being hunted. My friends told me to go to the police. I did. But without direct threats, there was little they could do. Document everything, the officer told me. If it escalates, we'll act. I couldn't sleep. I lost weight. I started having anxiety attacks on the train to work. I felt like my entire life had been taken over by this man, and no one could stop him. Then I got a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of me, taken at the office retreat. I was sitting by the fire, laughing, completely unaware. There was a post-it on the back. You look happiest when you're not pretending. My blood ran cold. I moved out 2 weeks later. Changed my number. Quit my job. And that's when the police finally started listening. The photo changed everything. I brought it to the police, along with my documentation. For the first time, they treated my case with urgency. The image, combined with the anonymous delivery and the post-it message, was enough to open a formal investigation for stalking and harassment. They asked if I had any idea how he could have gotten my home address. It wasn't hard to guess. As a manager, Brian had access to HR files. He didn't even need to hack anything. It was handed to him. And that terrified me more than anything else. He didn't just abuse his power socially. He exploited every system designed to keep people like me safe. Within a week, a detective was assigned to my case. They pulled my building security footage and confirmed the package was dropped off by a man who looked like Brian, wearing a hoodie and baseball cap, avoiding the cameras. The timestamp matched the day I saw him loitering in a car near my apartment. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. Meanwhile, I was in hiding. I had moved in with my cousin, changed my phone number, deleted my social media. I told my old coworkers I was taking a break. Only a few knew the truth. Most thought I'd overreacted. Some even said I'd made it up, because Brian rejected me. That part hurt more than I expected. People I trusted believed him, because he was charming, calm, articulate. I was the one spiraling, emotional, unpredictable. I'd gone from star employee to crazy ex-colleague in the span of 3 months. But the detective was relentless. They dug into Brian's past. And that's when things got worse. He'd done this before. 2 years prior, at a different company, a female employee had filed a complaint. It was sealed under a mutual NDA, she left quietly, and the company moved Brian to a different division. No criminal charges were filed. But the pattern was there. The detective reached out to that woman, and she agreed to talk. Her story was eerily similar to mine. Subtle manipulation. Gaslighting. Stalking. She said she still looked over her shoulder every time she went out. And she told us something that chilled me to my core. He doesn't stop until you disappear, or break. With her statement and my evidence, we finally had enough for a restraining order. It was temporary at first, but it gave me a tiny fragment of peace. Brian was served the order 2 days later. He didn't show up at my apartment after that. But he did show up to court, with a smirk on his face and an expensive lawyer in tow. And that's when the company's legal team stepped in, on his side. They claimed my accusations were unsubstantiated, and that the photo could have come from any source. They argued that my distress was subjective, and my resignation was voluntary. HR submitted a report implying I had a history of emotional instability, based on nothing but notes written after I had reported Brian. They were trying to destroy my credibility. But they underestimated me. I wasn't going to let him win. I hired a lawyer. She wasn't flashy like Brian's, no $1,000 suit or smug confidence, but she was sharp, meticulous, and she believed me. She went through every detail of my timeline, every text, every late-night Slack message, every email with hidden innuendo. She built a timeline that showed a steady escalation, and more importantly, a pattern of behavior that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. But the most important thing, we found his mistake. Remember the screen recording software that showed up on my work laptop? My lawyer got a forensic IT expert to examine the device. They confirmed that not only had software been installed remotely, but that Brian's login credentials had been used. And the kicker. Some of the recordings had been uploaded to a cloud account registered to his personal email. It was like he thought no one would ever look. The recordings showed my screen as I typed private notes, searched for apartments, and even chatted with friends about what was happening. He was watching me react to what he was doing, like it was a game. We subpoenaed the cloud storage. It was worse than I thought. He had videos from other women too, screen captures, Zoom meetings, internal calls. At least 3 other former employees, including the woman who had spoken to the detective. One file was even labeled, too sensitive to keep. That was the moment everything changed. My lawyer brought this to the court, and suddenly the tone in the room shifted. Brian's smugness cracked for the first time when the judge ordered a full investigation into his conduct, both at our company and his previous jobs. The company scrambled. Suddenly, HR was shocked and appalled. They placed Brian on administrative leave, pending investigation, then quietly fired him a week later. But I wasn't done. My lawyer pushed forward with a civil suit, not just against Brian, but the company itself for negligence, retaliation, and enabling workplace harassment. They tried to settle. They offered me a payout with an NDA attached, a 6-figure sum, more than I'd made in years. For a few moments, I considered it. I was exhausted, traumatized. I wanted it all to go away. But then I remembered that post-it. You look happiest when you're not pretending. That wasn't a compliment. It was a threat. A message from someone who thought he knew me, who thought he owned me, because he could observe my life from the shadows. So I said no. I wanted my day in court. The trial began 6 months after I filed the civil suit. By then, I had rebuilt parts of my life. I had moved to a new apartment, started freelancing, begun therapy. But I still woke up sometimes with my heart racing, certain I'd see him standing outside my window. The courtroom was packed on day one. Reporters had picked up the case after whispers of a tech exec harassment scandal leaked. But I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about the women who sat behind me, the ones Brian had also targeted. 3 more came forward during pre-trial discovery. One was a former intern. Another had left the industry entirely. All of them had the same story. Kindness, favoritism, late-night messages, followed by punishment when they rejected him. Each of us thought we were alone. Brian, of course, denied everything. His lawyer painted him as misunderstood, a manager with boundaries blurred by startup culture, who had only been trying to mentor and uplift talented women. They said I had misinterpreted his intentions, that I was emotionally unstable and vindictive because he didn't return my feelings. I sat there, listening to them twist reality into knots, and I felt sick. But then it was my turn to speak. I testified for 2 full days. I told the court everything: the retreat, the texts, the photo, the stalking. My voice trembled, but I didn't cry. I wanted them to hear me clearly. I showed them the screenshots, the recordings, the timeline. I watched the jury's faces change. Then came the forensic IT expert. He walked the jury through how Brian had used his admin access to install surveillance tools on my laptop, and how he'd used his personal cloud account to store the files. The expert confirmed timestamps, IP logs, device signatures. There was no wiggle room. Brian's face was pale the entire time. His defense tried to argue the files were research or training material. But it didn't hold. Especially when they pulled up the file names: Julia, stressed; Natalie, crying after one-on-one; Katie, alone at desk. It was voyeurism. Obsession. Control. The final blow came from a surprise witness. A former IT administrator from our company contacted my lawyer anonymously. He said Brian once asked him, off the record, how to monitor employees without setting off alerts. He provided a written statement and, later, testified in person. The jury didn't take long. They ruled in my favor on all counts: harassment, emotional distress, workplace retaliation. The company was also found liable for failing to act and creating an unsafe environment. The damages: 7 figures. But more importantly, Brian was done. He lost his job, his reputation. And when the criminal investigation caught up with him a few weeks later, due to the recordings and evidence of stalking, he was arrested. I watched the footage on the news, feeling nothing. Just tired. Relieved. Free. It's been just over a year since the trial ended. Brian is awaiting sentencing on multiple criminal charges, including unlawful surveillance, cyberstalking, and harassment. His lawyer keeps trying to reduce the charges, but with so many victims coming forward and so much undeniable evidence, it's just a matter of time. I still get panic attacks sometimes. Sometimes, a car that slows down near my building sends me into a spiral. I double-check my locks, avoid my old neighborhood, and I'm always looking over my shoulder when I walk home at night. I still keep a camera by my front door, and my therapist says I might never feel normal again. But I'm healing. I've started a support group for women who've experienced workplace harassment and stalking. We meet once a week, sometimes in person, sometimes virtually. The stories I hear make me cry and rage in equal measure. But they also remind me that I'm not alone. None of us are. The company that failed to protect me? Their stock dropped after the lawsuit. Several execs quietly resigned. They've rebranded, of course. New logo, new leadership. But I know the truth. And so do hundreds of thousands of people who read about my story when I finally decided to speak publicly. I gave one interview, just one. Not for clout. Not for revenge. But because I remember what it felt like to think no one would believe me. To feel invisible, erased, manipulated into silence. And I wanted someone out there, some scared intern or burned out employee, to know that they're not imagining it. That they can fight back. That they're not crazy. I'm not sure if I'll ever go back to corporate life. I freelance now, and I'm working on a memoir. It's hard to write. There are days when I stare at the blank page for hours. But when I do write, it feels like I'm reclaiming something that was stolen from me. My power. My voice. My truth. I still have the post-it. The one that was on the back of the photo. You look happiest when you're not pretending. I keep it taped to the inside of my journal now, not as a threat anymore, but as a reminder. He thought I was pretending. He thought he knew me. He didn't know anything. Because the real me? The one who stood up in court, who told the truth even when no one believed her, who said no when they tried to silence her with money. That woman isn't pretending anymore. She's here. And she's never going away.